We're marching through the Bible as quickly as we can, and we're going to talk today about Joseph and a little bit of the impact that he had on Egypt, and specifically the forgiveness of the man. We all know the story, right? Stripped of his fancy robe, Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt to Potiphar, who was the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Joseph read Pharaoh's dream and predicted and then prepared for a 7-year famine. During that 7 years of plenty, he stored up grain for Egypt, and then he was ready in the 7th year when the famine came, and it did come just as he predicted. He'd stored up enough feed to feed all of Egypt and the surrounding countries that came to him and asked for food. Now, what do we know about the famine that occurred? Did it actually happen? Well, here is a stela on Sahel Island in the Nile, Egypt. The island was a place for scribes who were in school to learn and practice on the rocks. So the stela reveals things that happened 1,000 years before the event were being chiseled on the rock by the scribe as practice. And the story is all about a famine that occurred during the rule of Neterkhet that lasted for 7 years. In case your hieroglyphics are a little bit rusty, I'll read this for you. I was in mourning on my throne. Those in the palace were in grief. My heart was in great affliction. Happy, the river god, had failed to come in 7 years. Grain was scant, kernels were dried up, every kind of food was scant. Every man robbed his neighbor. Children cried, youngsters died. The hearts of the old were grieving. Legs drawn up, they hugged the ground, their arms clasped about them. Even the courtiers were needy. All the temples were shut. Every shrine was covered with dust. Everyone was in distress. Needless to say, this famine was bad. Now, the famine stela was transcribed in stone 250 BC, and many believe the 7-year drought is just a myth. It's related in several cultures like Mesopotamia and Gilgamesh. But the stela's famine happened during the 18th reign of the king Djoser or Neferkasukar. Now that's the late 2nd century dynasty, and that's around 2700 BC. So it's about 700 years earlier than the story that we're reading about here in the Bible. It's not the Genesis story, but it describes some very similar gruesome events that would have occurred in Joseph's day due to the dyeing up of the Nile for a 7-year period. Egypt wasn't the only location that was suffering from famine. The land of Canaan was also very hard hit. In Genesis 41, it says, the famine spread over the whole country, and the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was very severe everywhere. Now Jacob in Israel sent his 10 sons to Egypt for food. He didn't send Benjamin for fear of harm, and he thought Joseph had died earlier, so that's why there were only 10 of them. And there the Israelites met Joseph, and his name, of course, was, you remember? Zaphnath-Paneah. Okay, Zaphnath-Paneah. I never knew that before, but he is. Arriving in Egypt, the 10 brothers meet Joseph. They bowed down with their faces to the ground. They didn't even recognize he was their brother. So many years had transpired, and also the situation was kind of odd to make it obvious that he was their brother. No, this was a man who represented, he was next to Pharaoh, and he's ruling in Egypt. And there would be no thought about him at all ever being their brother. It just was not even something that came to their mind. And he didn't make his identity known. Instead, the Bible says he spoke to them in a harsh manner. Why would he speak to them in a harsh manner? Any ideas? They sold him. He's standing there looking at the ones that sold him ages ago, put him down in a pit and sold him. And so maybe that's why he spoke in a harsh manner. Maybe he was doing it also so that they didn't recognize it was a brother, right? Anyway, he spoke to them in a harsh manner. And after remembering his dreams about his brothers, he said, Joseph said to him, "You are spies, and you've been sent here to see how our land might be unprotected." And 3 times they denied the charge. "No, we are 12 brothers. One is at home, and one is no more." Obviously speaking about, they thought, Joseph. The 10 spent the next 3 days in prison. Now that's an interesting thing. I've always wanted to put my sisters in prison. I would gladly have had a 3-day respite. But finally Joseph comes to them. He's probably trying to figure out what to do. How should I handle this? And he's just not clear about what he ought to do. And he came to them and said, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God." He knew that they were in fear of their life. He said, "Do this and you will live. One of you will stay here in prison as a ransom, and the rest may go and take grain for your starving families. Oh, and by the way, and this is very important, if you don't do this, you will not get any grain. Bring back your younger brother." Simeon was the one who remained back in with them, didn't get to travel home, and Simeon was the one whose life was on trial here, really. Now, because Joseph was using an interpreter as he talked to them, he didn't speak to them in Hebrew, though he was perfectly capable of doing that. He used an interpreter, and they felt that he couldn't understand them, and so they were free to talk amongst themselves in Hebrew. Yet, think about it, Joseph knew everything they were saying. He could clearly understand them. And this is what they said: "Surely all of this has happened to us because of Joseph. Remember what we did to him? Joseph was distressed and he pleaded with us, but we didn't even listen to him. We didn't even care. Because of that, our current distress is upon us." Little do they know. I mean, if they only had a clue. Reuben was the oldest, and he said, "Remember, I pleaded with you. I begged you not to put Joseph in the pit, but you didn't listen to me, and now we're paying for Joseph's blood, just like I warned you." Emotional, Joseph left them, and he went out to weep. He was being forced to recount all of those events in his life. The brother's anger, all of his life toward him, his sale to the Midianites as a slave, and his father Jacob agonizing over his death. He remembered Potiphar's house and how Potiphar's wife made it miserable for him while he was there, being thrown into prison, undeservedly so, and having his life almost taken away from him. He remembered interpreting the 3 dreams of the baker, the taster, and also Pharaoh, and he remembered the hard labor that he spent in 7 years of preparation for the 7 years of famine, the 14 years. He also remembered being raised to power as Pharaoh's vice regent, and his undeserved fortune at being finally able to be connected with his brothers. All of this was occurring because God's providence. Remember, we talked last week about providence, and that's not Providence, Arkansas. That's a different place. Providence and Jacob's foreknowledge. Jacob knew God was doing this for him. I was in the living room when Grandma was watching Days of Our Lives, just like she did every weekday. She always watched that, and the soap opera was interrupted for a brief announcement. Walter Cronkite came on the air, and he said bluntly that President John F. Kennedy had been killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. And so, as he did, he cried for a brief moment. We couldn't believe it. Joseph's sudden show of intense emotion probably hit him as hard as this event did hit some of us. Simeon, the second oldest, was chosen to remain as collateral, and he was bound so that the others could see as he was taken away. And then the remaining brothers were released, and their only course of action now, of course, was to go back and deal with Jacob and somehow convince Jacob that he needs to send his beloved son Benjamin back with them in order to get their older brother out of prison. Wow, what a story, right? Well, Joseph's instructions to his steward was this: go fill their bags with grain, put the silver that they paid back into their sacks. So all the money that they brought with them was put back in those sacks. give them provisions for their return trip. That evening after they left, the group discovered the silver. Can you imagine what they thought? Oh, how did it happen? We're in trouble. We're going to die. They're going to come after us. They're going to kill us. What has God done to us? They asked. If only they knew. If only they knew what God had done on their behalf. So the 9 sons make their return to the old man, and they tell him the story. The man who's Lord over the land of Egypt spoke harshly to us. He treated us as if we were spies, but we told him we were 10 brothers, our father's at home, and our younger brother, and Joseph, is no longer alive. He asked us to bring back Benjamin to Egypt. And Jacob replies, you've taken away all my life. You've taken all my children from me. First you took away Joseph, then Simeon, and now you would take away Benjamin? No, he cannot go. Everything in this world is against me. So Reuben jumps in and says, okay, pardon me. So they're talking and they're arguing about going back to get grain, and Judah jumps in and says, we were commanded to bring back our brother Benjamin. The vice regent will not meet with us without us having Benjamin with us. If Benjamin goes, we go. If he doesn't go, then we won't go. And we will starve. We could have gone and we could have been back twice by now. Since you're going, the old man said, take some high-priced products with you. They took balm, which I'm guessing is lipstick maybe, or stuff when you have chapped lips, balm, and honey, and spices, and myrrh, and pistachio nuts. Can you believe pistachio nuts are mentioned in the Bible? And almonds. And then take double the amount of silver to repay for the mistake. And you can take Benjamin back with you as requested. But go at once. Pray that Simeon and Benjamin both return with you. Because if they don't, I'm going to kill all of you. That's probably what Dad said. The question I have for you is this. He put double the amount of silver to repay for the mistake. Did Jacob pay twice as much as he should have paid for the grain that he was going to go get? I've always thought he did. Yeah, he paid for the mistake that had been made earlier, right? So there's a lesson in there for us, folks. If you find that someone has made a mistake and has charged you less, don't just smile inwardly and put it in your pocket and walk away. Give it back to them. If you make a mistake, be sure to correct it. And that's what we can learn from the old man Jacob in this story. So the 11 sons hurry to return to Egypt, but of course they're fearful. Meeting Joseph, he planned a luncheon for all of them. I guess that's the way you treat royalty and other people when they come to visit you. The brothers were fearful that Joseph planned to attack them while they were at lunch. You can imagine no one wanted to eat anything. They didn't feel like it. Truthfully, they confessed their surprise to find the silver back in their bags. In other words, when we left, we found the silver. We had no idea, but here it is. I'm bringing it back. The servant told them, don't worry, God gave it to you. The group's gifts were presented, and they bowed down. At lunch, Joseph questioned his brothers, how is your aging father doing? Is he still living? And he pointed at Benjamin and said, is this your youngest brother? And to Benjamin he spoke and he said, God be gracious to you, son. Yahweh be gracious to you, son. And he left them to find a solitary place to weep, and he was overcome with emotion, as you can imagine. Now, as the gifts were presented, the scriptures tell us they bowed down to Joseph. Where have we heard this before? Last week, or week before last, we heard the dream, and just as the dream promised, they bowed down to him. Now, the luncheon was an odd affair. Egyptians, there were protocols that they had to put in place. Egyptians couldn't eat with Hebrews. That was detestable. Joseph was served by himself. The Israelite brothers next were served. And then the Egyptians in attendance were served. And everybody sat apart. There wasn't any of this mingling among you to find out about your friends and the people who were there. None of that. That was really a strange affair. The brothers' places were also arranged in birth order. Now, don't you think that made them wonder, how in the world do they know which one of us should sit where? But they had little name tags there, and they knew exactly where they intended for him to sit. Benjamin's portion also was my kind of portion at Thanksgiving, 5 times all of the others. Kind of like, certainly what I would hope for on Thanksgiving. So they feasted, they drank with Joseph, and all of this time, they were not aware that they were talking to their brother and that he was providing all of this for them. Why did nobody mention that the Egyptian leader looks quite a bit like our brother Joseph looked? Well, it's quite a few years after that fact, right? But nobody suspected a thing. And here's Joseph's plan. Joseph is, always been known as the trickster, right? Because he tricked so many people. He had one more trick up his sleeve. He wanted them to leave with the grain and then come back to him. So he planted the opportunity in their sack of grain. And Joseph commanded his cupbearer, fill the men's sacks and include their silver, and also put my silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and then let them leave. Catch them down the road and convict them and bring them back to me. When you catch them, confront them. Check their sacks and you'll find the silver. Ask, why did you do this evil against us? And why did you take the cup? And tell them that we discovered it through divination, which was an Egyptian thing. And bring them back to me. Well, Judah said, what can we say? What can we say? We have nothing to prove our innocence, but God has uncovered our guilt, and we're now your slaves. Not only the one found with the cup will stay. We're now your slaves. And Joseph said, no, only the one who was found with the cup will stay. Well, you can imagine, Judah was concerned. Return without Benjamin? Our father's going to die of grief. Well, let me stay as your slave in the place of Benjamin. These brothers seem to be willing to jump in there and stay and take the punishment, if you will. After sending out the staff from the room, Joseph is left alone with his brothers, and he began to weep. He wept so strongly that all in the house could hear, and Pharaoh even heard about Joseph's wailing that he was doing while he was with the brothers. Joseph said, come close to me. I am your brother, the one you sold. Is my father still living? That's what he wanted to know. Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves. Here's why. It was God's plan all along for me to save lives. He sent me here ahead of you. God intended all along to save you as a remnant, and he planned for a great deliverance. And God made me father, if you will, to Pharaoh, lord of his house and ruler of all Egypt, for a specific reason. Now, we know about the remnant of the Jews, right? The remnant among the Jews are those who are faithful and believing Jews of the world. And after Jesus was revealed to be God's Son, the remnant of those Jews who have come to accept him. Romans 11:15 says, in the same way then, there has also come to be at the present time a remnant according to God's choice. And he's talking about Jews who have accepted Jesus. There aren't many, but there are some. Hurry back to my father. And in this illustration, they're already there talking to the old man. The brothers have returned and they're telling Jacob everything that happened. Tell my father to come here to me and that he will live with you in the region of Goshen. And bring your families back with you and your flocks, and you will live here close to me. What is a type? T-Y-P-E. What does it refer to?
Biblically, it is something that in the Old Testament reflects or sort of conceals what's going to happen later on.
Right. It's something that looks like different contexts, different prefix and everything, but it looks like what happened in the Old Testament. Someone or something that happened that looks like something or someone that would come later in the New Testament. People with common traits, a person that symbolizes the ideal defining characteristic of somebody, or someone in the Old Testament taken as a foreshadowing of somebody in the New Testament. So, what are the types of Jesus in this story? I've talked to you a little bit about types and how Joseph is very much like Jesus. Joseph is a type of Christ, if you will. Oops, I put in all the answers there. In what ways is Joseph a type of Christ?
He saved his life.
He was a deliverer. He saved, right?
He's a teacher also.
It's what?
He was a teacher.
He was a teacher? Okay. He taught them a lesson, that's for sure. Well, both of them dined with sinners. Joseph wept when he saw Benjamin, his brother. Jesus wept when he saw his brothers in Jerusalem in their sinful condition. Joseph was a shepherd. Jesus is a great shepherd. Both were stripped of their robes. Both were sold as slaves. Both had blood smeared on their robes. Both were unfairly accused. And both began their ministry when they were 30 years old. A lot of similarities here. And this is just the top of the batch. I mean, there's plenty more similarities between Joseph and Jesus when you look into it. Benjamin, then, is also a type of Christ. How is that so? Can you think of any ways that Benjamin would be a type of Christ? Could the brothers have had access to Joseph the king, or the guy who was serving the king there? Could he have had access to the king without bringing Benjamin, without going through Benjamin? He'd already told him, if you don't bring Benjamin back, I'll not see you. You got to bring Benjamin with you. So we can't get to God, we can't get to heaven unless we go to Christ. In a way, Benjamin is a type of Christ. Benjamin was a child of sorrow. Jesus was a man of sorrows. We can't see Jesus' face, the face of God, without Jesus being with us. Both of them came to Egypt to live for a time.